Okay. And I mentioned a few times to everybody that we are recording this, so if you prefer to not be on the recording, you should stop your video, or I can stop it for you if you prefer. But we'll record this so that we can show it in case this time frame wasn't good for people who would be interested in this. If they're working, the 2 o'clock time frame might be a little difficult. So that way everybody who wants to see it will have a chance. We'll put it up on Facebook and on our blog. So, and this is in preparation. We had some local authors joining us because we are having a writing contest this summer. The theme this year is Imagine Your Story. So we thought it was a perfect time for everybody to think about maybe writing their story. And we have ages from 5 to adult. There's 3 different categories. And we will be offering gift cards to the winners in each category. So we think it'll be a fun thing to do, and local authors are here to give us some pointers on how to get started or how they got started, and some ideas that might help us get started. So whoever would like to kick this off, please go right ahead.
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to ask is how many people do we have in that children's category? What is that age group again, Thelma?
It's 5 to 9 and then 10 to 13.
Okay, do we have anyone here in those 2 fields? Okay, excellent.
And perhaps the Fultons too?
What was that again?
The Fultons perhaps have children in that age group also?
And their mic is muted, so not sure.
She's typing, it says, yes, they are.
Yes, if you put the chat screen up, you will see and Grace also said she is also.
Okay, that's great. So we have 3 parties here that are participating in that category, right?
Yes.
I think the Fultons might have a few of them taking part, probably, right, Karen? How many?
Probably 2, maybe 3.
6, 11,
11, and 13.
13.
There we
Thank
are.
you.
Thank
Thank you, Wendy.
Okay, well, the thing is, for those of us in the writers group, we don't have a lot of expertise with helping children write, but Tom, bless his heart, is very versed in that. So I'm wondering if you would want to split the children and Tom and possibly Karen into another room, and then the rest of us deal with the teens and adults.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. I did set rooms up here, so let me create some rooms and assign some rooms. So Alyssa, are you staying here, or would you like to be in with the children's?
I'll go with the children's because my children are interested. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll send the Fultons and Tom and Grace M.
I feel like I'm being sent into a corner.
Tom, we're going to the kids' table.
All right. Well, I'm a kid at heart.
I'll put 60 minutes on that, but you can return to the main session at any time, okay?
I'm not going to be talking for 60 minutes. That's fine.
There you go.
All right. I'm not sure how this works, the breakout room, but.
There should be a join button for you.
I think Tom.
Did I not put you in that room, Karen? Let me.
I don't think you did. Nothing's
Okay.
popping up.
Okay. You should be there now. I see you. I have the option to be there at least.
Okay, great. So now we have, looking at the group of people here, so we have 2 competitors here, Josh and Patricia, is that right?
Well, we have trustee and staff, so at this point, Patricia works. If it's the same Patricia, I shouldn't say that. If it's the same Patricia, we do have a Patricia that works at the library, and Josh is one of our trustees.
Oh, okay, okay, but I mean, of the group of people that I'm looking at here, how many are going to submit stories for the contest? I mean, honestly, to be honest with you, I did not even think about the writers group entering the contest because I know we were asked to kind of help with it. So it didn't occur to me that we might enter it. And I suppose there's no reason why we wouldn't.
Well, as long as it's anonymously submitted, I don't see why not. And again, this will be, posted on Facebook, so people who are interested in entering the contest and couldn't be with us at this 2 o'clock time frame can click on it and, see the content.
Right, we might have a bunch of people that are at work that would be interested in and just couldn't do the afternoon. So I guess it would be helpful to know what kind of questions our potential authors have.
I would think, how do you get started? Where do you start?
Okay, well, let's just assume then that our audience is people that are going to log in later.
Uh-huh.
And go ahead and answer that question, just kind of like go around the room. So for myself, I have just 2 main ideas to give to people. I think first of all, you have to say everybody works very differently. What one person might say, oh, this is the way to do it. Somebody else will be like, oh, it never works for me. So if any of us have an idea, don't think, oh gosh, that's what the writers group says, so that's the way we have to do it. That is definitely not true. Now, in my case, there are two factors that are very important for me. One is I want to have an idea about what I'm going to write that I think about for 2 or 3 days. I don't do any writing. I just kind of think about it. And I don't even so much as sit down in a chair and say, let's think about that story. I just kind of put it in the back of my mind and walk around with it. And I find it absolutely essential to work with a computer. And I'll explain why. The process that I just mentioned to you results in me sitting down at a computer and saying, okay, let's write that story that I've had in the back of my head about blowing bubbles for my poodle. And I'll sit down and I'll just start typing, and a story puts itself together. But it's not really going to be even close to an end product, because maybe 3 paragraphs down, I'm talking about going fishing with, an entirely different dog. And after a little while, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Do you want to tell the story about fishing, or do you want to tell the story about bubbles? Because they don't go together. And that's where the computer comes in handy, because I can just pull out the part about the fishing and put it in another document and save it for another story. But I don't get all discombobulated because, oh my gosh, it doesn't fit. I have to make it fit. I have to rework it. I can just let the computer do all that for me. On at least one occasion recently, I was writing something and it just wasn't going together right. And I realized that I had paragraphs out of sequence. I was talking about something that happened before something else. And I knew the whole story, but my reader doesn't know the whole story that way. So they're not following me all of a sudden. I've taken a jump that they're not with me on. And there again, the computer's awesome, because you can look at that and say, oh, here's the problem right here. It's this paragraph. And you pull it out and you put it somewhere else. So for me, the kind of style that I use is to think about what I want to do, walk around with it for 2 or 3 days, and then sit down and let my computer help me. And sometimes it's horrible. It doesn't work. I thought it was such a great idea, and I sit down in front of the computer and it's a stupid idea. It just doesn't work at all. So I have to go back and I might end up writing something about an entirely different subject, like helping my husband fix the motor on his car. So, I mean, they can be that different. It's so you don't have to feel like I'm married to this story, so this is the one that I have to write. No, if it's not coming together and you don't like the way it feels, you don't have to stick with that. You can just trash it and move on to something else. So that's kind of how I get started. I'm going to pass it off to the next person.
Well, for me, because I write novels for the most part, and for a lot of writers, the hardest thing is coming up with an idea. You're thinking, I want to write, but what am I going to write? So you kind of have to narrow it down. First of all, you have to kind of think, all right, do I want to write in a particular genre? Do I want to write a romance? Do I want to write a ghost story? Do I want to write an adventure story? So first of all, you have to narrow down what kind of genre you want to write in. When I wrote my first book, I knew I wanted to write a children's book. And I thought, okay, what did I like in a children's book? And I thought, all right, I like adventure. I like treasure hunts. I like ghosts. I like time travel. I made a whole list of things I liked in a kid's book when I was a kid. And then I thought, okay, I'm putting those all in. Well, that's kind of a broad era. I needed to narrow it down. So I thought, all right, I'm going to have time travel in it. And I began to think, all right, what era would I want to be in? And a little nugget came to me. It was something my sister had once told me. When my father back in the 1950s bought this dry cleaning place. And in this dry cleaning place, there was a vault where people had their old fur coats. And they found this old fur coat, and in the pocket or in the lining of one of these coats was a bullet. So I looked at that and I went, okay, why was that bullet there? Who was wearing this coat? Were they shot at? Did they have the bullet in their pocket? Were they going to use it for something? So thinking, okay, fur coats and bullets made me think of the 1920s and gangsters, the raccoon coat. So that became the time travel element of this story. So look at what's around you. Look at things that you know, that you have read. Reading is really, really important. Read, if you know what genre you want to write in, read some stories about it. Go online, read short stories about it. There's so much out there that can kind of help trigger ideas for what to write about. But the easiest thing is to write about what you know. If you know, all right, I love to go swimming in the pond, write about that. You're swimming in the pond and all of a sudden your foot hits something in the bottom. What is it? You pull it up. There's some gold pieces in there. Where did these gold pieces come from? And you take it from there. So try and come up with things that you can relate to initially and then expand on it from there. That's kind of what I like to do.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I write memoirs, and I didn't start out initially to write anything, but one day I asked my husband a question. And that's how my book began. I asked him what it was like for him dealing with Alzheimer's, and he told me it was like standing on melting ice. And it went from there. I wanted to know how he was feeling and what he was dealing with. And so I just kept asking questions and writing down what he was saying. And then I would just kept analyzing and looking at how it was affecting me. And that's how I wrote 3 books on the trilogy of this long journey. But I had already, excuse me, been reading a lot of books about Alzheimer's. So once I got into the whole process of writing, it kind of looked at what's missing out there in the collection of books to help people with, and sort of pattern my story after that. So out of that, suggestions I have for people: if you don't know what you want to write about, do a lot of reading and read a lot of different authors, and see what interests you, and then go from there and figure out what you'd like to write about. Is it about mystery or time travel or history or romance? And take it from there. I like to write on the computer like Sharon does, because I can move things around if it doesn't look right, and or delete it or save it for another document. But one thing, another thing I would really suggest to people, once they've got something in their mind, what they want to write about, carry a little notebook and pencil around with you wherever you go. And if a word or a phrase pops into your head, or you see something that, oh, that'd be great in my story, write it down so you don't forget it. You've got your own little resource ready with you, and you're carrying it along. And then sometimes, especially when I'm writing poetry, I think I know where it's going to go. And then all of a sudden, it takes a whole different pathway. And what I thought I was going to write about isn't what the poem ends up with. So don't be discouraged. Instead, be surprised when something like happens and you end up changing your pathway. So,
Cool. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Rachel or Marlena, something to add to our thoughts?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. So I do NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, every year. And in Nano, there's generally two camps of people. You're a planner, where you sit down and you think through your story. And the first few times I did it, I tried to be that. I tried to sit down and outline everything and make sure that I knew what was going on. Turns out I'm more of a pantser. I know the characters, I generally know what they're supposed to be doing, and then I just make words and we see what happens. I never was able to, just because of my job and the way that I was doing things, I was a reporter for a really long time. And I could never find the time to sit down and structure out, writing time. So I kind of just, whatever time I had, I would sit down and I would write and we'd see what happens. I have lots of half-filled notebooks that I would, as Marge said, I would have all the notebooks on me and, hey, this is a really good idea, and I'd write it down. Or I have, notes. The notes app on my phone is full of like 1 or 2 sentence things, but somebody said it and it was funny and I want to hold on to it, so it went in my notes. I have I usually use Google Docs for writing, because then I can, if I happen to be writing on a different device, if I'm, at work, I work at the airport. Sometimes if I'm sitting in the back all by myself, I will open my Google writing doc on one of the work computers and take that 10 minutes to write something, anything. I try, my biggest writing advice is, if you think you don't have time, you may not have time to carve out a big writing block, but you have 10 minutes here and there. A lot of my first book was all poems, and all of my poems kind of came in and, okay, I have 10 minutes, I can write 4 lines, let's do this, which is a lot of what I did. Yeah. No,
Great, we have some rejoiners. Great to have everybody back.
Right, I told you I wouldn't be talking for an hour.
Well, I want to be sure.
Thelma, we had a question.
Okay.
So how strict are you going to be on the word limit? I don't have that in front of me.
We had a range, figuring that would work better with a range of words. So we went 100 to 250 for the 5 to 9-year-olds, 250 to 500 for the 10 to 13-year-olds, and 1,000 to 2,000 for the 14 to adult. We thought by giving them a range, it would be easier for them to, fit in to those numbers. It's a good question. Personally, I'm not the one doing the judging, so I guess we have to pass that on to the judges. If they submit a story, I'm perfectly happy to read it and, go from there. So we'll have to leave that with the judges, I guess.
Well, speaking as one of the potential judges, you've got a nice range there of words, so it's not like people have to come up with 121 words, and if it's over, we're not going to see it well. But if you're in one of those categories and your story is twice as many words as the amount that we're allowing, I would suggest that pretty early on you just contact one of us and say, gee, what would you do with this? How would you cut this down so that we can fit it into that slot? Because we're not wanting to just cut everyone loose. We would like to perhaps be able to use the library's email address, for instance, so that people can direct questions to us and say, gee, I'm halfway through this, but I've already got twice as many words as I need. What do I do? And one of us will be happy to get back to that person.
And would that be the same avenue for someone, especially in the younger range, or who perhaps is struggling to come up with 100 words for their story?
We're open
Could they
to all
also-
questions that have to do with writing. They can ask us any question that
Okay.
has to do with writing. Yep.
Okay.
That's really, really good. We have a great resource here, and that they will let us use them is amazing. So we're very happy about that. Very happy about that. So Rachel, I don't know if you were finished with your input here as people rejoined us, but if not, please go right ahead and continue on.
I was hoping if I hit the space bar, it would just temporarily unmute me. I don't really think, I had anything else of huge value. My biggest thing is always, like I said, take whatever time you have to write. And, as others have said, don't be so stressed about, this is the thing that I wanted to do, but I don't like it. It's okay. If you don't like it, you can throw it out and start over. There's, you're not stuck with writing something that you hate. You should be, if you're writing it, you should be, you're your first audience. If you don't like it, then maybe you should try something else.
Thank you. And I think
Elma,
Marlena-
there's a chat down there. There's a question for you.
Okay, I have my Imagine Your Story up in front of it, so, and the breakout room. So I am 9, I am turning 10 in September. Yeah, Grace, you could be in the 5 to 9 group if you would like that, certainly. You're still 9 at this point, so does that help? Are you feeling that you might like to write something longer than the minimum for that age group? You can answer in the chat. See if she has any other questions about that. And it's another reason to give the, I will do 5 to 9. Great, that's fine, Grace, you're good. Which is a nice reason to do the range too, because you do have a range of ages. So, some of the younger children certainly might want to stick to the lower end of the range, and some of the older children might want to stick to the higher end, but certainly they can write anything in between that suits them. We're looking forward to it, Grace. And I don't know if you heard all the authors say they're happy to help you. So if you have any questions, I'm going to put my email address here, the library email address, and you can write to me, and I will be happy to see if one of the authors can help you with whatever problem you're struggling with as you get started. And Marlena, did you have something to?
Sure. Actually, when I was thinking about starting out and getting started with writing, I like to go from a what if perspective. If I can think of things, especially if you're talking about fiction, just stuff that maybe you've had dreams about. What if I woke up tomorrow and sprouted wings? What would happen in life? Or what if I actually said what I wanted to say when that person said the wrong thing? Or what if I don't know, I like to start out with the what if situations, because it tends to open up a lot of like vistas for what could possibly happen. You could take that sprouted wings thing in a whole bunch of different directions if that's what you wanted to do. And I do remember when Stephen King wrote a book on writing, and he talked about how he likes to start with situations. What happens if a woman and her son get trapped in a car and there's a rabid dog outside? What would happen? And he kind of takes the situations, not necessarily characters, and plays out the situation from beginning to end. But I agree with what everybody else said about writing stuff down as you go. I'm a big fan of asking Siri to take a note for me and write, I had this idea, or like Rachel said, I heard this quote and I really want to use it, and it sparked ideas, and then I can always go back to that. I write kind of memoirs and articles and stuff, so I'm kind of nonfiction based, but I find that the what if helps me there too. For the industry I'm writing for, I can talk about what if I changed this, or what if this wasn't a certain way, and how would I fix it? And if you kind of just brainstorm based on a what if, you can come up with a whole bunch of different ideas and thoughts to kind of follow down and easily come up with 600, 900 words about whatever it is. So that's that's my big takeaway for getting started. I like to start with a what if and go from there.
Grace, do you have any questions about how to get started you'd like to ask somebody? I don't know what you covered in the children's breakout room, but if you have a question, feel free to type it, and I'm sure someone would be happy to answer it for you. While she's thinking
It's
on that.
possible too that we should take advantage of the duality that Tom presents, because he is an incredible gift to the writers group, and his talents are not just with children but also with adults. In fact, on a couple of occasions, we've had adult writers working on books that have just gotten stumped, didn't know what to do, and Tom has had the solution on both of those occasions. So we might want to ask him what his messages would be for adults on how to get started.
Absolutely. The floor is yours, Tom.
Put me on the spot. Well, again, Marlena mentioned the Stephen King book, and that, as well as others, it's like writing in scenes. You know, we say over, I don't know how many times the phrase in our writing group has come up, show, don't tell, which means you don't go on and on describing, you try to paint a picture using a scene in order to get your story across. So the story would move from scene to scene, and that way it's a more active presentation. So I guess the one thing that we've talked about so many times, it's true, is to show, don't tell, but write in scenes so that your story moves along. I got a motorcycle going by. And I think, I think basically that's a number one thing. And the other thing is that, and I think all of us have trouble, myself a lot, is just sitting down and doing it. You know, it's so easy to procrastinate on writing and find all these other things that you got to do before you sit down and write. And even if you don't have an idea on a given day, you can sit down and spend half an hour or an hour just putting the time in. Usually something evolves. Famous last words to somebody who hasn't shared anything new for the last few weeks.
Something else I learned from Tom at our Writers Guild meeting. When you're finishing up a chapter, try to end with something that brings the end of the chapter back to where you began, so that everything is tied up. You're not just left, that there's some cohesion to it.
Great point.
Another thing that that I learned from Tom, and I've seen him mention this in our writers group a few times to great effect, is, you know, you want to tell a certain story, and you sit down and you start writing on that story, but it's just not working. It's not coming together, but you love the story. Tom has pointed out, you do not need to start at the beginning. You don't need to make it chronological. You can start with the part of that story that's the most exciting for you. You may not keep it at the beginning, you may move it later, but it will get you started writing on that story that you want to tell. Just jump in where it's most important to you.
I like flashbacks. That's why, you know, I did something, it makes a story interesting to have it go back and forth in time, not confusing, but just to move back and forth in time. I think you see that a lot in books. Some have to be chronological, but they don't all have to be. Even if you're writing a memoir type of story, which is mostly what I do, it can still move around in time.
You want your opening sentence or opening couple of sentences to be so dynamic that they grab your reader, that they want to know what happens next. You don't want just a boring sentence. Today is Thursday, the sun is out. You want something that says why today is Thursday and the sun is out, that will grab you to read the rest of what's there.
All great points for sure. And to mention that there is the Weare Area Writers Guild. Is that your official title? Weare Area Writers Guild. They do meet. So anybody that would like to be part of the group, I'm sure they welcome new members. Usually they meet at the library, but at this point the library isn't open. So we certainly will be keeping up on Facebook, posting any changes to all of those schedules and that we have at the library. Are we thinking those pointers are going to do us for now? And by all means, if anybody has any questions, please email the library at wearepl@comcast.net. I will be in touch with any of the authors that will give you some information on how to continue, how to edit, any of the topics that they were speaking about. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help you move along with your story. We do have a deadline, but it is quite a ways out. It's July 30th. So you have time to work on your stories, submit them to the library. You can email them to us. You can drop them by. We will be starting curbside, so you can put them in a bag and let us know they're coming, and we'll be happy to pick them up. We will not let any of the judges see the names, so they will be judged, anonymously. We will keep the name list at the library, so we know who the winners may be. And I think that's probably the details of the contest, unless anybody has any other thoughts on the contest that I need to add to that. We look forward to having some entries. And we thank all of our area authors for joining us, and all of our future writers for wanting to participate in the writing contest this year, and look forward to it. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Thelma.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great day, everyone.
Hi.